So here we are. The mom's come in. She's ready to abort. And you know that actually if she's had it in her past, she's likely to have it again. And so what do you say to her as she's contemplating abortion?
I am yours, I am yours, I am yours, send me, Lord. I am yours, I am yours, I am yours.
Welcome to the Gospel-Centered Pro-Life Podcast, a podcast designed to equip, encourage, and challenge you in pro-life ministry, and always with a focus on the gospel. Stay tuned.
I felt your passion, I've touched your heart.
Use me, Lord, use me, Lord.
Welcome back to the Gospel-Centered Pro-Life Podcast. Appreciate you guys joining us, and we hope these podcast episodes are a blessing to you. I've mentioned it in the past, but I want to mention it again, that we have set up a website, which is just a small little web page, nothing special, with our podcasts on it, and a search feature where you can search topics and keywords and things like that and find any of our podcasts that have that keyword in them. You can go to gospelcenteredprolife.com, and that should take you right over to that webpage. So gospelcenteredprolife.com. If you want to share this with friends and family members and things like that, you can share it that way, or you can share it through whatever podcast service that you use. I do appreciate you guys that share this podcast. Appreciate the feedback that we get from you guys. We get emails from time to time, messages from time to time about some of our episodes and how they're a blessing. And so we'd love to hear your feedback, positive or negative feedback. We're not above correction. We'd certainly, if we've said anything that's off key or whatever, we want to be corrected. We want to say and do that which honors the Lord Jesus, and we don't consider ourselves experts, although some people may consider us to be experts in this
some
realm of
areas
ministry.
we're sort of expert.
Yeah, I guess so. But more than anything, we just want to encourage you guys and bring subjects that come across our radar, across your radar. And that's how most of these podcast episodes come. We have some kind of situation that we deal with a mom or somebody, and we like, hey, man, we should do a podcast about that. And that's where this podcast episode is coming from. Kind of a weird subject for some people, but it's something likely if you are ministering on the sidewalk, ministering to moms that go to these abortion centers, you're going to likely face it. So what's our subject?
Yeah, well, this was actually a topic that one of our sidewalk missionaries contacted me and said that this mom had gone into the abortion center, was planning to abort, and it was based on the fact that she had a history of postpartum depression.
Okay. And
she was very concerned about going through that again. It had been pretty rough, pretty devastating. And the sidewalk missionary that contacted me really knew very little about postpartum depression, didn't really know how to address it. So I thought that would be a good thing for us to talk about. I have had women with what I would consider baby blues. There is a difference between the less serious baby blues and exhaustion that probably every new mom feels and postpartum depression. But so I did some research, contacted our high-risk doctor, and she sent me a couple of articles, contacted our wonderful Dr. Matt Harrison, who is the pioneer of the abortion pill reversal, and he works with many moms, and asked him for some input. So that's how this particular article and podcast developed.
Okay.
So so the first thing, is the woman was threatening abortion, and I believe the counselor had kind of talked her at least momentarily out of that.
Okay.
But then didn't quite know what now.
Yeah.
What's next.
Yeah.
So what the things that I counseled immediately were that we had a high-risk doctor who she could contact. And I think that's number one thing for people to have in their repertoire.
Yeah, absolutely. Having some kind of medical professional that can speak to this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, the best is that medical professional is a believer in Jesus.
Yeah.
we're dealing with things like postpartum depression. I mean, having an MD, certainly an OBGYN, because she's dealt with that stuff before, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
But maybe having someone that deals in the mental health realm,
Yeah.
someone that deals in the counseling realm that's dealt with postpartum depression. And maybe, because it's not always easy to find an MD or someone who's like, certified or whatever in this area,
Yeah.
maybe you can't find that. But having maybe a connection with a church that has a counseling center or something
Right.
like that, but connecting them to someone that can get more in depth and that has dealt with these situations is probably one of the most important things you can do beyond praying that
Sure.
the Lord moves in that
Sure.
situation.
Yeah. So in this article, the first thing that I thought we should do is define what it is so that our counselors and anyone listening to this podcast really knows what it is. You may have a general sense, but the Mayo Clinic's definition of postpartum depression is, first of all, differentiates it from baby blues, which I
Okay.
mentioned.
Is that like a technical thing? Baby blues?
Baby blues. That's what that was in the article. It's very common. Moms are new baby, new schedule, exhausted, all these hormones surging through you.
Right.
So it is very common to have mood swings, crying spells, anxiety, difficulty sleeping. And the difference between postpartum depression and baby blues is that the baby blues usually begin within the first 2 to 3 days after delivery and can last up to like 2 weeks. But postpartum depression is long lasting. It can even in extreme cases turn into an extreme mood disorder, which is called postpartum psychosis.
Okay.
And it usually occurs after childbirth. It can begin before the baby's born, but usually it occurs following childbirth. So one of the things that it really made clear in the articles that I read and that the doctors I spoke with, it's treatable.
Okay.
And it is serious. Take it seriously. I think that's important.
Okay.
That anyone who interacts with a mom who says she has a history of it or she is currently going through it, take it seriously, but reassure her that there are effective treatments. And the sooner it's identified, the better the treatments are and the more effective that the treatments are. So
I would say one of the things, just to chime in real quick, as a man from that male perspective, when you encounter these women, I think we've said this and reiterated this point several times, that when you encounter a mom and she gives some reason why she's coming to the abortion center, sometimes those reasons can be ridiculous to us, and we don't understand, and we don't connect with it, right?
Yeah.
Especially as a man and dealing with postpartum depression, like no man's ever dealt with postpartum depression.
Right.
So we could be tempted to kind of just shrug it off. It's like, well, that's no reason to kill your baby.
Right.
But I want to reinforce what you said, that we need to take it seriously.
Yeah.
We need to, like we've always said, identify with their pain, even though it does not justify them killing their child. To them, it's real. To them, it's, at least in some sense, a justification to be at the abortion center. And we need to take it seriously. We need to address it. Now, probably as a man, I'm not going to get as in depth as you would with the situation. Right. But certainly, if I've got people that I can get on the phone, if I'm out there on the sidewalk and I'm talking to a mom that's going in, she said, well, I've dealt with postpartum depression in the past and I don't want to deal with that this time, still dealing with that or whatever, I'm probably going to call a female counselor over.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to point her to the pregnancy center. Hey, don't go in there. There's people at the pregnancy center that can talk with you about that. And then again, if I have a medical professional, somebody can get on the phone, a counselor, something like that, definitely want to connect her with that person too.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is very important. We mentioned this in the article. I would recommend everyone read the article because we're not going to be able to get into the depth in the time we have. But one of the things the experts say is if there is a history of postpartum depression, there is a greater likelihood in subsequent pregnancies that there will be postpartum depression. So this woman's fear was real.
Yeah.
I think it might have even been her doctor that had sent her to the abortion center, which is so sad and
Yeah.
so terrible, because you may or may not have postpartum depression, but it is serious, it is debilitating, and it can be so severe that it can affect the mother's ability to bond to the child, and the child could literally be in danger. It is very important that a professional
Yeah.
be involved if that is in the woman's past. But so some of the symptoms, so that you know that this is different, more severe than just the crying, the tiredness, the sadness or irritability that often accompanies an exhausted woman following the birth of a baby. But with postpartum depression, it's usually developing within the first few weeks after giving birth.
Okay.
May begin earlier during pregnancy. There's depressed mood and severe mood swings, excessive crying. This is an important one. Difficulty bonding with the baby.
Yeah.
That's different from the baby blues. Baby blues, there is sadness, there is irritability, but you love your baby.
Yeah.
And the postpartum depressed woman may not feel that. She may just be detached
Yeah.
from that baby. She may withdraw from family and friends, losing appetite, having insomnia or sleeping too much, overwhelming fatigue. All of those accompany new childbirth. So you can see why sometimes it's hard to differentiate the two, which is why you got to get a professional in to diagnose. Hopelessness is another sign. Feelings of worthlessness, shame, panic attacks. This is another really important one. Thoughts of harming yourself or the baby.
Yeah.
Again, that's not a normal baby blue
Right.
response. Recurrent thoughts of death or suicide is a really serious thing that you should always pay attention to.
Yeah.
And if it's left untreated, it can last for many months or longer, which would, of course, severely affect the outcome for that child, because that's such an important time
Yeah.
of bonding, early on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, so some of the risk factors, we wrote those down. And what I noticed was that a lot of them are similar risk factors to what we see in the women we encounter at the abortion center.
Yeah.
Just in general, financial problems, weak support system, problems with relationships, all those things we see probably in every woman we meet,
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
out at the abortion
Yeah.
center.
In some
And
measure,
here's
for sure.
a big one: pregnancy was unplanned or unwanted. So you know that you're probably going to run into women with postpartum depression, given these risk factors, which are so prevalent in the women that come for an abortion.
Yeah.
History of depression is particularly indicative of the chance of postpartum depression coming up. So here we are. The mom's come in. She's ready to abort. And you know that actually if she's had it in her past, she's likely to have it again. And so what do you say to her as she's contemplating abortion? And I think one of the things that we often say to women whenever there's a possibility but not a certainty, that we can use that same discussion with a woman with postpartum depression.
Yeah.
She may or may not have postpartum depression. But
Yeah,
if
I mean, it's similar to those situations where you encounter a woman at the abortion center that says, I had whatever the disorder was,
high blood pressure is a common one
yeah.
during the last pregnancy.
preeclampsia, is another
Exactly.
problem
Yeah,
that people have during pregnancy. So they might say they had complications with their last pregnancy and they don't want to take a risk this time. Like you mentioned earlier, their doctor sometimes has counseled them to come to the abortion center because they had past issues. And so, it's important to remind them that not like just because you have a certain thing in your past does not necessarily mean that thing is going to manifest currently. And then I think you have to, either way, like we have to confront what the real issue is And the real issue is lack of a connection with the Lord. And you can do that very graciously. You want to bring Jesus into the equation, right? And the way I would do that if I was having this conversation, well, you need to bring Jesus into the conversation for sure, but you also need to talk about the humanity of the baby. You need to dispel the myth, the lie that baby is just a pregnancy, just a process that they're in. That baby's actually a human being. So, but bringing Jesus into the equation, if I was to encounter a woman in this particular scenario, I would first identify with her pain. Because I'll ask the question oftentimes in the course of the conversation, so what makes you feel like this is something you have to do? And I can imagine it playing itself out. I have not yet, just so you know, I've not yet encountered this.
Yeah.
I've talked to women that have had postpartum depression, but not coming to the abortion center in that particular scenario.
Right. Yeah.
But so I asked them, what makes you feel like abortion is an option for you? And if this were to come out, well, I deal strongly with postpartum depression. My last 2 children, I had a heavy postpartum depression, and I just don't want to deal with that again. And so my first response would be, man, that's terrible. I hate that you dealt with that.
Yeah.
And then I would bring Jesus into the equation. Like, God, I would say something like, do you believe in God? 9 times out of 10, yeah, I believe in God.
Yeah.
And so, God sees that pain. God knows the depression, the struggle. God knows all of that stuff, and he cares about it. And so I bring Jesus into the equation. I maybe would bring some scripture. The Bible says, cast your cares on the Lord, for he cares for you. Jesus cares about the stuff that you're going through. He wants you to cast those cares on him.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be talking about the humanity of the baby.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that baby that you carry inside of your womb is precious to the Lord? And even though you might be struggling even now mentally, or had struggled in the past mentally, your children are a blessing.
Yeah.
And that baby you carry right now, though he or she is very small, that baby's alive.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I start talking about, your baby's heart's already beating.
Yeah.
And then after that, we're talking probably, this is a 5-minute conversation or less. I'm pointing them right to the mobile ultrasound unit, or right to a pregnancy center down the road, right to somewhere other than that place. Hey, would you be willing just to go down the road to the pregnancy center? It's 15 minutes away. Here's the address. And they will have a nurse that will give you a free pregnancy test, free ultrasound, and they can talk with you about all this stuff.
Yeah. And I like what you're doing is you're taking her focus off of her own fears and pain and putting it on another human being.
Yeah.
Which is that baby, and also, of course, on the help that God. And I liked what you said when you said that God knows about your pain and your struggle, because so many of them describe themselves as feeling like they're all alone in this, and that no one understands, and bringing in the fact that, well, God does. God understands.
Yeah.
And he's there. So those are all good. And talking about, again, of course, that there's a certainty if you take the child's life, the baby's dead, and the baby may or may not have. Or you may or may not have.
I would certainly mention that.
Yeah.
You may have had this in the past, but that's no promise that you're going to have this issue in the future.
Right.
But what is certain, that's an uncertainty. You're not sure that you're going to have that.
Yeah.
But this is certain, that if you go inside of that place, your baby is going to die.
Right. Yeah. And then, if possible, if it was a doctor that sent her there, her doctor, you need to help find her another doctor.
Yeah.
It's kind of, there are pro-life doctors. In fact, and I spoke with Dr. Matt, because I am hardly an expert on this. I actually never experienced postpartum depression myself with any of my pregnancies. But it is serious. Dr. Matt said it can be very serious, and it can lead to severe depressive disorder. So you do need to take it seriously, and it does need to be treated and addressed. But he said the answer is never killing the baby.
Yeah.
There is treatment. And so reminding the woman also, and knowing that yourself, I didn't know that. I didn't know what they could do for postpartum depression. I thought the woman just had to gut through it. But apparently there are drugs that you can even take during pregnancy that are safe during pregnancy. So he said, when I did talk with Dr. Matt, he said that there are really some important things that sidewalk volunteers should know. First, that it can be treated safely and effectively. It is effective. There is good medication available.
Yeah.
But he also said and I thought this was so important for us as sidewalk counselors in especially Love Life Ministry, who appoints mentors to these women. He said the woman will require a lot of support if she's struggling with postpartum depression. So he also made another point. I do want maybe you to talk a little bit about, okay, the woman needs a lot of support. So what are we then to think and to provide and to think about, as our follow-up with this woman?
Yeah.
But he also said postpartum depression is a real issue, may or may not occur with that pregnancy. But post-abortion traumatic syndrome is also a real issue and can be devastating. And he said if they abort, they're adding a new level of another trauma that they are going to have to deal with, which of course is even worse because it's not only them, but now it's also his child.
Yeah.
So in terms of the extra support.
Yeah, well, in terms of the extra support, I mean, I think if we encounter a woman in this situation, assuring her that we have churches that will walk with her, stand with her. I mean, one of the things with any kind of depression is loneliness and people feeling alone, people feeling isolated, people feeling like there's no one that cares, and letting them know, reassuring them that there are people that care.
Yeah.
In this city, this is oftentimes my statement, in this city, there are literally hundreds of churches with people in those churches that want to walk with you through this pregnancy.
Yeah.
Can we connect you with one of them? And just letting them know. And I think in these situations, I know in these situations, we need to be very intentional about how the words that we use. We need to be very intentional about the tone of our voice. We need to be very intentional about really understanding this person's in mental anguish. This person is struggling mentally. And though we can't connect with that, like I certainly, again, I can't connect with postpartum depression. And really, I've been bummed before, but I've never been like clinically depressed. I don't know what all of that entails. When you start talking about medications and all that stuff, like I don't know about all that stuff. I don't know that world of medicine, and I have some skepticism about that, right? About psychiatric drugs and how good they are and all that stuff. But just because I have some skepticism about it doesn't mean I write it off completely. And again, I try to stay in my lane, right? I don't know about all that stuff. So one of the things I'm not going to do is I'm not going to poo-poo that stuff. Right. I'm going to right away, if I can, and get her away from that abortion center. And then with some follow-up, let's say I've sent her to the pregnancy center down the road. I've gotten her contact info. I probably would hand it off to you or one of the female counselors at that point.
Yeah.
The follow-up from that would be connecting her with a medical professional, or at least following up and saying, hey, did the pregnancy center, did they help get you connected with a medical professional? Because quite likely that could happen if she shared with them. And she may not have shared with them, so it might be on you to connect her with a medical professional. Yeah. And then, again, following up with, can we connect you with a mentor? Because to me, that may even go further than connecting her with a doctor or some kind of counselor or something like that. The fact that there are people in this thing with her could be that invite her to church. I mean, listen, God can break through in those situations and alleviate any kind of depression, fear of depression. I mean, I think that's what we're talking about, really. We're not talking about maybe dealing with the actual depression or encountering a woman at the abortion center. We're talking about dealing with the fear that could happen.
Exactly.
Right?
Although, down the road, if a mentor or a counselor is following a woman through the birth of their child, you may encounter someone who's actually then in depression. But right now, this situation that arose was just the fear of the depression.
I think for me, like just going through this, I breezed through this article when you sent it over, but I'm learning something, like to me, that's pretty profound, which is that I knew postpartum depression was a real thing, but didn't really understand, like, gosh, it's more than just they're bummed because they don't have a baby anymore. That's kind of what my thinking was, like they're missing the fact that they're pregnant or whatever. This is more than what they call the baby blues. And so to me, this is enlightening, at least knowing that this is a reality for some people.
And what went through my mind with, I think, like you said, I think the mentorship is critical, very critical for this woman. She's going to need a lot of support, is what Dr. Matt said, and what the articles I read said. Therefore, the church or whoever is appointing a mentor, if your city does that, and I hope that more and more cities will be doing that, a mentor with the backing of a church to follow this woman, that mentor needs to know this is going to be intense, because there are some people who are willing to take that on as a mentor.
Yeah.
There are different levels of what people are willing to give as a mentor. And in this case, this is going to be someone it's going to be intense. And so
Yeah.
it needs to be a mentor who is willing to be involved. And the ideal one would probably be someone who has been through it herself. But we wrote out a list of things that we should do as sidewalk counselors. And I think those are important.
Okay.
They're kind of the take-home list.
All right.
But don't minimize the issue is the first thing, which we've said. A doctor needs to know she's pregnant and worried about postpartum depression, so you need to find that out.
Yeah.
Recommend a second opinion. If a doctor has referred her to the abortion center,
Yeah.
then for sure
She definitely doesn't need to go back to that doctor.
You need to go find not only a second opinion, you need a new doctor.
Yeah.
Talking about that treatment is available. Oftentimes, just knowing that will help them.
Yeah.
They may not have known that. Speaking with a high-risk doctor, having that available, reminding her it's temporary. I don't know if we mentioned that so far, but that's really important. And this is a good counseling technique for anyone we encounter at the abortion center. They're usually in a situation that's temporary.
Yeah. Yeah. A good statement is don't employ a permanent solution for a temporary
Very good.
issue.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
abortion is a permanent
Yeah.
solution.
Yeah.
It's permanent in the sense that it permanently ends the life of a baby.
Yeah. And I didn't write this one down in the article, but it occurred to me to be on the lookout of women who have an unusual level of detachment from the baby growing in them. And I have seen that. I've never heard it labeled as postpartum depression before.
Yeah.
But I had one woman, I think we spoke about her in the past, some other podcasts, that kept saying she agreed with everything I said, but kept saying, I just don't want this baby.
Yeah.
I don't love this baby. I don't want this baby. Had I known more about postpartum depression, that statement might have been a tip-off to me. Is there something more than just sin?
Yeah.
Is there something going on that is chemical, which I assume that it has to do with the hormones and things?
Hormonal
Right.
issues and things like that. One of the things that comes to mind for me is that we do oftentimes see, and so I said I don't know that I've ever encountered that situation, but I quite possibly did and just didn't know about
Exactly.
it. Because
Yeah.
oftentimes what we do see is somebody come to the abortion center who just had a baby, right?
Right.
When we see it a lot, women come in with a
Right.
baby carrier, not just a car seat, but a baby carrier in the back. So
Yes.
they have a newborn in the car and just got
Yeah.
pregnant again.
Yeah.
And it could be, I mean, I think more than anything else, it's like, well, we don't want to have another baby right now because financially or relationally or whatever, we don't want to do this. But it could be that postpartum depression thing.
Yeah.
They're dealing with that from that last pregnancy.
Yeah.
And being able to speak to that, acknowledge that, I think could be helpful.
Or a flat affect. I've seen that, the really flat affect as the women are looking at their baby on the ultrasound. That's not normal. That is not normal. And it didn't occur to me that that could be another tip-off of, is there some sort of a depression, a postpartum depression going on? The last point is just keep pointing her to focus on God. And we added some verses at the end of this article to help. But never neglect that. Just because it's serious, just because it's real, this is a real medical condition that does need to be addressed. But that doesn't mean you neglect helping them to put their focus on God and reminding them to really trust Him and turn their lives over to Him. So I think that's basically what we discovered. We breezed through this, but if anyone has further questions, of course, feel free to contact us and do some research on your own. I think it's more important than I had realized the more that I researched it.
Yeah, and I would say it's good to have, like in your phone, this is what I do a lot of times with different topics and things like that. I'll look for articles, and then in my phone, I'll save in the notes section a link to that article. And that's something you could text it over to somebody if you're, I mean, to me, I can think of my scenario if I'm dealing with a dad on the sidewalk. He says, well, she's in there because she's dealing with this, with
Yeah.
postpartum depression and just really doesn't want to have another baby and deal with this again. Like, man, can I shoot you over an article just for you guys to check out? I'm going to encourage him along those lines.
Yeah.
I do think, though, of course, I've said we need to be careful with our tone and we need to be careful with our language. You don't want to come across as like judgy or condemning. But we do need to be forthright. We do need to set out the reality, like, you understand that you're going to kill your baby if you go through with an abortion. I don't think we dance around that. I think we tell the truth.
Yeah.
We do it graciously as possible. But yeah, for me, the takeaway is just acknowledging that this is a thing, that this is an issue. So I want to encourage you guys just to look for articles that you can have, maybe like I do, save it in your phone.
Yeah.
Check out this article, sidewalksforlife.com is where we put these articles out. Maybe at some point in the future, we'll mesh the two websites, the website for the podcast specifically and the website that we have the articles on together. But for now, you can go find the article, sidewalksforlife.com. That's our training and equipping website as well. So just some sidewalk training and stuff that are there. Beyond the articles, we have other things, videos and stuff. And then, of course, the podcast website, gospelcenteredprolife.com, to check out our podcast and be able to search for keywords and things like that for subjects that we've covered in the past. We do appreciate you guys listening. And if you need to reach out to me, you can reach me, Daniel, at lovelife.org. You can reach her, Vicky, at lovelife.org. We'd love to hear from you. But until next time, God bless.
God bless you all.
Give me an outlet for love. Give me an outlet for gratitude. I know it will cost me my life, but nothing's too precious since I met you.